Minister, the Advocates Network has called the increases unacceptable, unconscionable, and unfair. There's been, as I mentioned, wide-scale outrage. Let me just share just a few social media comments. They're wholly. Gerald says disproportionate compared to what civil servants got, very self-serving. Kigon says, I don't see the justification for MPs to get such high pay. It makes sense that cabinet members get paid similar to senior executives, but only if they satisfy similar requirements. And Fefen says the percentage increase should match what the civil servants got. Even then, I'd say a caring government would use a median, the average of the lowest and the highest. It would show solidarity with the people you're taxing. We spoke 24 hours ago and you were saying you thought if people understood the background, then they would be accepting of the increases. So 24 hours later, have you been surprised at the level of outrage and anger?
Well, Dionnne, some of the comments that you have just shared sort of demonstrate that some of the information that we're trying to provide has not necessarily seeped in. And I would want to just start this evening by just making sure we're on the same page as far as information is concerned. What you describe as increases for parliamentarians and ministers has happened in the context of a broad public sector restructuring, compensation restructuring, where that was evidence-based and market-led. And across the public service, one of the common things that we found was that the leadership across the public service, or the compensation in leadership areas, was extremely far from comparators in Jamaica. We're not talking about externally. And what the compensation restructuring was able to achieve, and it's a restructuring, it's not an increase. In a salary increase, everybody gets the same thing. It's a restructuring, it's recomposing compensation in a way that allows us to attract and retain. And for the leadership across the public service, we had adjustments to compensation that were significant. I just want to share a few of them with you. Just give me a minute or two.
Minute.
Well, I can do it in a minute. All right, 1 minute. So here we have the salary adjustments in the teaching profession. For principals of the largest secondary schools, they were paid at 2.9 million to 3.4 million. As of April 1st, 2023, they're at 8.5 to 10.9. For principals of the smallest secondary schools, 2.2 to 2.6 to 5.6 to 7.2. For principals of the largest primary schools, from 2.4, let's just look at the starting, 2.4 to 7. For principals of the smallest primary schools, from 1.7 up to 5.6.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I remember you making that point during the negotiations, but it sounds to me as if you hadn't picked up or you don't understand that there is significant, I'm referring to that, that there is in fact significant anger within those sectors as well, because of what is seen as a huge disparity in what the people at the top have got compared to the people lower down.
Absolutely. And I can address that. I can address that, but allow me to present.
Point doesn't appease anybody who is upset at the parliamentarian side.
Unless you don't understand the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that the adjustments in salaries for parliamentarians and ministers occurs in the context of adjustments to salaries for the leadership levels across the public sector.
I understand.
And then we can. So now allow me to.
The point I was making, though, is that the concern is that those adjustments as a whole were inequitable in relation to what is now the gap between the leadership and the rest of the.
Once I present it, I'd love to have a chance to address that. In the nursing profession, I'm having the two top levels. The same if you were to go with the top 3 or top 4 out of 8. The persons were at 3.5 to 4.2 million, and now at 9.2 to 10 million. The level 7 from 3 to 3.6, now at 8.2 to 9.5 million.
Minister, you're not comparing, as a colleague of mine likes to say, mangoes and mangoes. You're not, because what you're doing is showing us, for instance, you're showing us nurses, you're showing us teachers, you're going to show us lawyers in a moment, you're probably going to show us judges, you're going to show us what else you have. And the concern is that you are showing us the salaries of highly qualified professionals, and you're comparing it to cabinet ministers.
Let me at least
allow
me to show it. You told me you'd give me a minute to show it. So allow me to show it and then ask me the questions. No, man. No. I just show all of them.
You don't have to go through
so legal officers 4.9 to 10 and 4.1 to 10. You don't have to go through
all of that to make your point. I understand the point you're making. That there has been.
I just have two more.
No,
it's
but
not
it's
for
the
you.
Same point.
It's for your. It's for your watchers.
You're making the same point over and over.
It's across the public service, and we're showing.
And I understand that. So we don't have to look at 10 billboards
medical doctors.
To understand
I have one more. Medical doctors.
Well, I have to
went from 3 million to 8.2, 2.6 to 7.3, 2.2 to 6.3. And I have to show you the civil service.
No, you don't. Let's go to the break. We'll soon come. Looked at the salaries that our parliamentarians are now going to be getting and compare them to what elsewhere in the Caribbean is paying. So the Prime Minister, Jamaica, for instance.
So we know that these salaries, we've done our homework. So I don't know that these salaries
you don't want me to share with the public.
Put parliamentarians and ministers in Jamaica higher than any other country in the Caribbean region.
You're trying to stop me from sharing.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so
I am saying to you, I'm familiar with it, and I'm sharing it as well.
Are not. So let me go ahead very quickly. Prime Minister for Jamaica is going to be over 25 million. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister is 13 million. Bahamas 13. Minister of Finance for Jamaica 21.7 million. Trinidad and Tobago 9 million. I'm quoting everything in Jamaican dollars. Bahamas 10.2 million. In Jamaica, Cabinet Minister will be at 20.2 million. Trinidad and Tobago 9 million. Bahamas 10.2. And an MP in Jamaica will be at 12.5. Trinidad and Tobago 3.8. Bahamas 4.3. How on earth do we justify these levels of salaries in a country that we're certainly doing far worse than Bahamas? And when you look at what is happening elsewhere in the region, there's absolutely no justification for this, surely.
Okay. So, again, first of all, Barbados, Trinidad, and Bahamas have not entered into a public sector restructuring.